Today you'll be stuck with my long ramblings. Matt's been a little under the weather. We've got all kinds of things going on. I've had all kinds of things going on. So today we just wanted to come in and touch base, talk about some things that we've been kind of working through, and something we were going to talk about today anyway until some circumstances made it so that Matt really couldn't be here. And also I wanted to tell you that this will probably be our last podcast until after the first of the year. Just take a little break. I've got all kinds of family things. I'm sure everybody understands that. So, and I'm not a very good podcaster, so we just want to make sure that you like the podcast and share it if you can, because that really helps us out in terms of what shows up in the system and those kinds of things. So, long story short, so we were, last week, I think we couldn't meet either, and Lauren was going to come back the first of the year. We were going to try to finish something up. Couldn't meet either, and Lauren was going to come back. At any rate, some of the conversation that we were having, we kind of got into a millennial thing about legalism, and not millennials and legalism, but what legalism looks like, and from different perspectives. And so, Matt and I are 1,000 years old, and so we look at it a little different than somebody, Lauren, and some of the things that she had that happened to her when she was younger. So, with all that said, there's been several things happen this week, and so one of them kind of landed in John chapter 8, and it was really about, so what's the way to deliver the gospel, and how would Jesus deliver the gospel, or how would God do it? And so those were the kind of the top questions that came out of that. I'm not really here to answer those questions, but in looking at it in the things we've been talking about, legalism and how people perceive things that turn into legalism when you're not even trying to. And the way to contend with some of this stuff is, like Matt and I talk about it, it's a Peniel moment. Peniel being face of God. And have to go deal with him to try to figure out, well, how do I really walk, talk, and act? And that is a development movement, right? Everything we do, even Lauren talking about what came across or could come across as she was corrected in a class, or seemingly corrected, and we carry those things. How to deal with it? Well, those are things that in our normal walk, that if in Romans it tells us that God works out all things for the good of those that love him and are called to his purposes. And so you have to believe that. So no matter what the circumstance that transpires, by your own hand, external circumstances, whether it's in a church training, or just walking through life trying to figure out the kingdom, God can manipulate any of those things that transpire. So, and I don't mean to manipulate in a bad way, but for you personally to be able to help you grow, and you have to be able to believe that, right? But we're human, and so we always look back on everybody else and go, well, it's their fault. I'm messed up because, and we park on those things, and we even see our own faults, and we'll hold on to those and go, well, I'm not really this, that, or the other. And we're not looking forward. So this passage I'm about to read kind of addresses a lot of that stuff. And so it was in John chapter 8, verse 1. So I'm going to read it here to you. I'm going to read it in the New Living Translation. Start with verse 2. But early the next morning, Jesus was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and Jesus sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery, and they put her in front of the crowd. I don't really know what that setting was. They were sitting down having church, so to speak, and all of a sudden they come dragging this poor woman in here. Obviously, she was a Hebrew of sorts, or working in that religion, and that's a good way to look at it, right? So the church, the organized corporate church is going on. And then they bring this thing in. And so they just speak up. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? Now, there had already been a lot of tensions going on with Jesus' teachings and such, right? But hold on to that. So in verse 6 it says, they were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. Not a one-time thing. They'd been doing this for some time. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. Don't get lost in writing in the dust. There's all kinds of things that people have written about that and all that. But what you really need to get a hold of is that these religious leaders could have even been well-meaning, right? Serious about the kingdom, as far as they understood it and knew it. And they dragged this woman in front of him in the middle of a teaching session to really just try to catch him. This is what we do when we hang on to what we know is right and it has to be right all the time. Not that we have to be right, but the system that we're following. And Jesus was kind of tossing that up a little bit, and it was bothering people. So these guys come in, drag this woman in, say this, and they're like, so the law says that we do this with her. What do you think? And he doesn't say anything. He just reaches down and he starts kind of scribbling in the dirt. And then they keep on him. Evidently he didn't say anything, right? And so they just keep, but this and this, and you need to tell us, and because you're standing up in front of all these people, and you know, you need to make a statement here as to what's transpiring. So then he stands up and he says, all right, I hear your law, and it's right. But whoever is without sin gets to cast the first stone. And you know what? That looks like something exactly like God would do to me. Not to me, but I mean in his actions. Because we expect a given response based off sometimes of our training and our natures, how we think God is supposed to work. And that's what they were doing. Religious leaders at the time, they were doing it how they think God is supposed to work. But his thoughts are not our thoughts, and his ways are not our ways, right? And so he stands up and he says, okay, well, let the one who has no sin cast the first stone. Now watch this. And after he said that, he reaches down, he starts drawing in the dirt again. He's not fighting with them, right? So in verse 9 it says, when the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest. What that means is as he said that, and it sat and it kind of started soaking on them for a second, they started realizing the truth of what was really happening. And I mean truth in terms of how God sees it. And so the older, more experienced ones in life, and these were probably people that were well-meaning, right? Not completely arrogant and all that kind of stuff. They realized what was happening. They could see what was happening, and so they just walked away. Because they had no answer. They couldn't contend with that. And it probably humbled them to a big extent. They'd never thought about it like that. Well, when God speaks, that's usually what happens to me anyway. I see something and I see the truth in it, and I thought, man, I should have seen that a long time ago. Don't even know if that's the proper response, but that does what happened. And then you either respond well or you don't. When God speaks and does something, that's what it looks like. You're going to have a moment where you just go, I never even looked at it that way. And so they all slipped away, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd. So all these people at church were still there, and they watched this happen. I don't know how many religious leaders were standing there that all eventually walked away, and they left this woman sitting in the middle of the floor. And it says in verse 10, then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. Whoa, that really takes our idea of how things are supposed to work. So what I was telling you, these stories that came in, How do you deliver the gospel? Well, like Lauren was here talking the other day, that evangelism explosion, they use the Roman road thing, right? You may know what that is, you may not. But it's using a set of scriptures going down through Romans. Nothing wrong with it, right? It works really well. And how you present, you have to say a prayer, and you have to repent as a sinner, and you have to accept Jesus as your Savior in terms of words and how you're supposed to do that, and or say it for the prayer of salvation. And that's man putting things on top of that. Let me tell you what really happened right here, or at least as I see it. It wasn't that Jesus reasoned with them. He spoke from the truth of the kingdom, and the creation responded to that. It wasn't that a man stood up, and if you stand up and say, well, if I reason people well enough out of my vast knowledge of my scriptures and all that kind of stuff, then there should exact a certain kind of response. That's human thinking. Jesus just spoke the truth involved in this from how God looked at it. He is God. He has that mind. He has that capacity. And he just said it. And it's the same thing that John the Baptist was doing back when he was preaching. That's why all the people were coming to him. He was saying things like God would say it, and it was resonating with the creation, and he had the Spirit of the Lord in him, so it literally was coming out that way, right? And so the big lesson here is are you in tune with the Spirit of the Lord? You say, well, I don't know what that means or how I do that. I think that that's grown too. You learn how to deal with that, and you only do that in front of God, and the development that transpires, and be able to walk in freedom and those kinds of things. And I say that because Jesus goes on, he tells them here, Jesus turns around, he speaks to the people after he finished talking to her. And it says, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness, because you will have the light that leads to life. We read those words and we know that we're supposed to follow Jesus, but what does that really look like? Well, that woman knows what it looks like. I don't even think it was so much because she didn't get stoned. It was because the Creator recognized what was happening. He spoke the truth to these people, how God has always looked at it, even though in the Old Testament it says, if you bring an accusation to somebody, the elders are supposed to investigate it thoroughly, and then they're supposed to exact judgment. And if the one that's making the condemnation or the accusation, if it turns out that they were just mad at this person and made up an accusation, then they were supposed to get sentenced with what they wanted to happen to the other guy because they were mad at him. And in the Old Testament, it's in Deuteronomy, and it says, have no mercy in that. That's where the eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth comes from. That the guilty were supposed to be charged with those things, and that was supposed to happen on that. Well, she did get caught in adultery, I guess. But the issue at hand was how the kingdom was looking at it, and how, excuse me, and how he didn't forgive her sin. Well, he did forgive it, but he's looking in the future, right? And his blood paid for that and dealt with it. And he looks at her and he says, from our position, he would have looked at that and said, you are forgiven. Well, she didn't come out, I guess, and say that she had been doing adultery, but through the conversation, she knew that that's what she was there for, and she had done it, right? He forgave that, and he said, go and sin no more. Man, how you deliver the gospel and how it's supposed to be done, that's where we get convicted at. So some of the stories that we talked about here that came up this week, one of them was about a guy that does prison ministry, and some inmates, one got saved and another one wanted to get saved, and they were in a condition where they couldn't baptize or anything. So the guy he said, I got a bottle of water here. Can I baptize him? Would that work? This is all being done through correspondence, by the way. And they told him that he could. And the guy that told him that, I guess he gave that story out on his platform, and he got demolished, saying, you can't do that. he won't be saved. He's not really saved if you don't, have full immersion and all the other intricacies that they had involved in all that. That's not how God looks at that. David and his men even ate the showbread. That was a big no-no. So I'm babbling on in all this, that it's not a liberal way to look at it. It's looking at how God wants to look at it and then sees it. And if we don't know those answers, be patient and keep pursuing. Even pursue how you think it's supposed to be done, maybe. But be looking for the truth. Because God's not afraid of the fact that you may have done it wrong. It's just respond when you see the Spirit teaches you or shows you something different. And He may not give you the answer, but you may see that it's different than what you thought it was, and now you have to pursue to find out what that really means. That's spending time in the face of God, and that's where He wants you. That's how you manipulate situations, so to speak. He's looking for you to stay in His face all the time. And then, like Jesus told these people, if you'll live like that, you'll walk in freedom all the time, and you don't have to worry about all the baggage that's going on. The more you walk and the more you learn, the freer you become. If you find the fact that you're not being free or any of that, you're not looking at it the way the kingdom is. You're looking at it as a measure of how men tell you to do things, and it's not working. Well, that's the long and short that I have for you here, and I'm sorry you had to endure all that. But as I said before, we sure appreciate you coming to look and to listen to us. And let us know, when the new year comes up, like Lauren did, she sent us some questions and thoughts about things that she had. We'd really enjoy seeing that come from more of you, if you would do that. It gives us an idea what to look at. Our idea here is to sit down and talk about how the kingdom's really working inside of us as best as we know how, because we're learning too. But we do really appreciate the fact that you're looking and listening to all these things and the feedback that we get. We really appreciate that. So if that's of use to you, we ask you to send more information to us, and I just ask you to pray for Matt and the family too. They're going through some difficulties as well in terms of Brenda and those kind of things. So at any rate, again, like it and share it for us if you will, and we will see y'all after the first of the year. Y'all have a blessed Christmas. Bye now.
Show, and I don't know if that's
We're taking applications for a new show host.